Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at cell physiology. I'm just going to give you a heads up. This is like the third time I've recorded this video because I want to try to do this so that you understand. This is really difficult information and we're going to go over it some more in class, and I may try to post a few more videos to help you. But if you leave this lesson with more questions than you started, that's okay. Bring those questions to class so that we can answer them and so that I can really help you understand this to the best of your ability. What does cell physiology mean? It's looking at how cells function or work. We're looking at those Stirring-Gurr processes, what we studied so much in first quarter. We're really going to start talking about it. So the three things we're going to be looking at is cell transport, photosynthesis, and cellular respiration. So let's look at cell transport. So Stirring-Gurr, synthesis, transport, cell transfer is a Stirring-Gurr process. So it does three things. It lets food in for nutrition, it lets oxygen in for respiration, and it lets waste out for excretion. There's nutrition, respiration, excretion, three more of your Stirring-Gurr letters. So what has to happen is materials have to move in and out through the cellular membrane. We talked about that mosaic that we have that is the cellular membrane, which is the phospholipid bilayer that has these membrane-bound proteins that move around. Right? The cell membrane is selectively permeable, okay? It doesn't let everything through. It selects and lets certain things through and certain things cannot come through. So let's look at this diffusion demo, okay? So here in this image, we have a dialysis bag. A dialysis bag is some dialysis tubing that's tied at two ends. Dialysis tubing is selectively permeable like the cell membrane. It is selectively permeable by size. So large molecules cannot go through the bag, but small molecules can. So inside the bag we have starch. Starch is a really large molecule. Remember, it is a polysaccharide. It's made up of many sugars. And then on the beaker on the outside we have iodine. It's the yellow stuff that you see in the beaker. All right? Over time, what you're going to see is that the starch molecules are not going to move. They don't diffuse out. They stay in the bag. However, the iodine, which is really small, diffuses into the bag. It can go through the small pores in the bag. And what we see is the inside of the bag turns black because, remember, starch and iodine react to make a black color. That was our starch labs when we did the testing that. So that is an example of diffusion by a bag that is selectively permeable by size. All right, so we have two types of cell transport. We have passive cell transport. Passive cell transport does not require energy. We move down the concentration gradient, and we'll talk more about concentration gradient. And the concentration gradient means moving down that gradient means we're moving from high to low, and that is passive transport. Then we have active cell transport. This requires energy, okay, or ATP. We're moving against the concentration gradient, which means we're moving from low to high, and that is active cell transport. All right, diffusion. Diffusion is a type of passive transport, okay? It's moving from high to low concentration, all right? An example is oxygen moving from a high concentration in the lungs, so you have a lot of oxygen in your lungs, but you don't have nearly as much oxygen in your blood, especially when the blood is coming from your heart into your lungs so that it can get that oxygen and then move back to your heart and be pumped to the rest of your body. Okay, so when that blood comes into your lungs, it's blue. It doesn't have oxygen. All right, your lungs are filled with lots of oxygen. So the oxygen is going to move from the area where there's lots of it to the area in the blood where there's low. And this movement is called diffusion. We're moving from high to low. All right, the molecules move until they reach equilibrium. Equilibrium means that there is an equal concentration on both sides of the membrane. So there's an equal amount of oxygen in the lungs and in the blood, and that is equilibrium. All right, osmosis is a type of diffusion, but it works osmosis works with the water moving. The water moves from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water. Okay, so instead of other things dissolved in the water, we're looking at the concentration of water. So, for example, in salt water, there is more water in the surrounding environment, so the cells shrivel up. Okay, so if we place, if we place cells in distilled water, that means there's lots of water. Okay, the cells are going to swell and burst because all the water is going to move into the cell. All right, and then they can't hold any more water and they burst. But if you place it in a salt solution, all right, the water is going to move out into the salt solution, all right, and then we're going to, the cells will shrivel because we're trying to move from a high to a low concentration. All right, again, they move until they reach equilibrium. All right, let's look at cell energy processes. There are two cell energy processes that we're going to study. That is photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration are both Stirnger processes. We see within them they say synthesis, which is the S in Stirnger, and respiration, which is one of the R in Stirnger. All right, the two processes work together in a cycle, okay, within plants, and then in conjunction with animals eating plants, we get the whole process coming together. All right, photosynthesis involves making food or sugar glucose for nutrition. All right, so here we have a chemical reaction. All right, on the left of the reaction are what we call reactants. They are what go into the reaction. All right, and the reactants in photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and sun. Sun is a source of energy. And then the products, what is produced by the reaction, are C6H12O6, which is glucose, and O2, which is oxygen. This is how plants take CO2 out of the air and make O2. All right, photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts of the cell. We've talked about this before. All right, and chloroplasts are green because they contain chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is specially designed to capture light energy. And they look green because the green light is reflected, and the reflected light is what our eyes observe. Their green reflected light means that all the other wavelengths are absorbed by the plant. All right, so this is going to be a question here. We're going to talk about what's going in and what comes out. So you'll have to answer this question in on Edpuzzle. All right, let's look at ATP. All right, so the food made in photosynthesis is used to make energy for the cells. Now the food, okay, that is made is sugar, glucose, and plants make all the food for all living organisms, okay? Food itself is not energy, all right? They're two different things. Energy is ATP, so organisms, including plants and us, use food, glucose, to produce energy. And they produce this compound called adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate has one adenosine group and 3 phosphates, the P's that you're seeing in this image. Adenosine triphosphate is energy. It's the energy molecule. It stores the energies in the chemical bonds, and when the chemical bonds are broken, energy is released with a snapping-like motion. All right, so let's talk about cellular respiration. Cellular respiration works in conjunction with photosynthesis. It takes what's made in photosynthesis and it makes energy. So it takes in that sugar, the C6H12O6, and the oxygen, O2. And those are now reactants, whereas in photosynthesis, they were products. So we're now using them as reactants. And in the process, we're making CO2, carbon dioxide, water, H2O, and ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This occurs in the mitochondria of all cells. Cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria. All right. Cellular respiration, however, can occur with or without oxygen. When you don't have oxygen, it occurs in a different path. So when you have oxygen, we call it aerobic respiration. And aerobic respiration occurs when oxygen is present. Aerobic respiration is preferred, and it makes a lot of ATP. Anaerobic respiration, which is also called fermentation, and you may have heard of fermentation. It's used to make alcohols, okay? Fermentation and anaerobic respiration occurs when oxygen is not present. When it happens in plants and organisms, it's called alcoholic fermentation. This is how we make beer and wine and all those other alcoholic beverages, all right? And in animals, it produces lactic acid fermentation. Lactic acid is part of what makes your muscles sore. You build up lactic acid in your muscles, and that's when you are working out so hard, there's not enough oxygen making it to your muscles for all the work you're doing. And it's okay, it's not a problem. It's part of how our muscles grow and develop and become stronger, but it does lead to a little bit of pain, and it causes that exhausted feeling. Anaerobic respiration is not as good as aerobic respiration. It only makes a little bit of ATP, but over time you will do a combination of both, and it ends up working out, and you make enough energy as you need, as long as you're eating and drinking and doing all the things you need.